Here's there we go, the gist of the sermon today. I'd like you to say it with me. Ready? Quick to listen. There you go. Quick to listen. Slow to speak. Slow to become angry. Quick to listen. Take two. Repeat this after me. Quick to listen. Slow to speak. Slow to become angry. Quick to listen. Slow to speak. Slow to become angry. I want you to think of someone in your mind. I want you to think of someone who is a poor listener. I want you to think of someone that when you are talking, this person you can sense is just waiting for you to take a breath so they can jump in and start to talk. I want you to think of someone who talks and talks and talks and talks. I want you to think of someone in your mind, not out loud, no looking from side to side, who you are hesitant to ask a question of because you don't want to know that much about the topic. Think of that person who's a poor listener and a dominant talker. You have that person in your mind? Now here's another question. What kind of a relationship do you have with them? What kind of a relationship do you have with someone who's a poor listener and a dominant talker? Here's another question closer to home. Do you think anyone thought of you? Are you a dominant talker and a slow listener? And if so, do you have the self-awareness of what it is doing in your relationships? How you listen, how I listen, how we listen is critically important to all of our relationships. Think about our faith. At the heart of our faith is a relationship. Our faith is not primarily about rules and regulations and routine. It's really about a relationship with God as evidenced by how we relate to one another. Of all the rules and regulations, Jesus said the number one command is primarily relational. Love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as you love yourself. Our faith, it could be argued, is defined and determined by our relationships and how we listen, how we learn to listen is a key to good, healthy relationships. So during this teaching, I'm going to ask you I'm going to give you some to-dos this week, but I really want you to be open with yourself and with God about listening. As a leader, I've been around churches for a long time. And do you know how we often handle conflict in the church? It's exactly right. We don't say anything about them. We bury them. But when we bury conflict, is it really gone? No. Quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. My teaching today, as I've said, is really simple. It's simple to remember. You're not going to go, wow, I've never heard that before. I never heard that concept. But here's the thing. We need to be reminded of what we already know. We need to be inspired to do what you know is really helpful and not hurtful to your relationships. So here it is. Ready? Be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. One quick, two slows. So we're in a study in the book of James. I want to encourage you every week to read a chapter of James. Last week, I wanted you to read chapter 1. This week, chapter 2. The assignments are in your program, along with 2 Bible studies, along with some study notes today as you're listening. I want to encourage you to do the James Bible studies and read through the 2nd chapter of James. James was written by the brother or half-brother of Jesus. James is not real theological, because James probably didn't spend a lot of time, he didn't have a lot of time to think theology yet. Unlike Paul, he didn't go away for 3 years. So James, in my opinion, lives with Jesus for 20 years, and then he writes a very, very down-to-earth practical book of how to get along with other people. And that's the book of James. James is, don't sing about it. Don't say it. Show it. Show me by your faith by what you do. In fact, he says, and we'll get into this next week, he said, faith without action is dead. Faith without action is dead. Jesus said it a little differently. He said, produce fruit in keeping with repentance. Again, James, all through James, he reflects his brother Jesus because he spent 20 plus years in the same household with Jesus. James is blunt. James is direct. He can be off-putting at times. James was not a believer in his brother until he saw him rise from the dead. And that'll make you a believer. And James became a leader in the church for 30 years. And so we want to study his book. So today's passage, which was wonderfully read in 3 different languages, it's wonderful to kind of remind ourselves that it's not just English people that believe this stuff. They're people, English-speaking people, people all over the world for these past 2,000 years. It's quite amazing, quite amazing. So James starts out his teaching this way. My dear brothers and sisters, take note. Again, take note. He's saying, sit up straight. Listen to this. You're gonna tend to not pay attention to this because this is so simple. Another translation translates it, my dear brothers and sisters, instead of take note, it says, you know this. James is going to say, you know what I'm about to tell you, so don't dismiss it. Take note. Sit up straight. Take notes. Remember this. This is important stuff. 3 commands. The first command is this. Everyone should be quick to listen. Quick to listen. He's saying your first priority in a relationship is to listen. The first priority in a relationship before speaking is to listen. Is to listen. Is the Holy Spirit speaking to anybody right now? Is to listen. You know, we tell little kids, you got 2 ears and 1 mouth. Use it in proportion. Maybe you don't say that to little kids, but maybe you should now. He's saying the number 1 priority is listen quickly before you do anything else. Have you ever met with someone and you're asking all the questions and they're doing all the talking and a half an hour comes and an hour comes and they're doing all the talking and you're asking all the questions and at the end they go, wow, this was great meeting with you. We ought to do it again. And you kind of think, well, yeah, it was great for you, but you didn't ask me one question. It was great for them because they got to talk. And sometimes that's a good thing to do, that just you give them you serve them by listening to them and asking questions. But it's great for them because they did all the talking. You did all the listening. Listening is so important. Again, James is just reflecting what Jesus would say. Jesus would often say, whoever has ears to hear. In other words, James is saying, listen. Jesus is saying, listen. Jesus said, do for others what you'd want them to do for you. Do for others what you'd want them to do for you. Don't you want people to listen to you? Yes. Yes. Well, do for them what you'd want them to do for you. You listen to them. Be quick to listen. So here's an assignment for you underneath this heading. One way to listen better is to ask questions. One way to listen better is to ask questions. So ask questions this week. Again, think about Jesus. A lot of times people think Jesus is the answer man and he has answers, but he's also the question man. All throughout his life, he asked questions. Why do you call me Lord, Lord, and don't do what I say? Do you want to get well? What do you want? Do you love me? Do you really love me? Who do people say that I am? Why do you call me good? You have little faith. Why do you doubt? Etc., etc., etc. In the beginning of Jesus' life, at 12 years old, we find him in the temple, and he asked his parents a question. Do you remember what it was? Didn't you know I had to be about my Father's work? And then at the end of the life on the cross, he asked another question. My God, why have you forsaken me? Questions. Questions are powerful. So this week, as you're learning to become a better listener, regardless of where you are on the listening scale, ask questions. Command number 1, be quick to listen. Command number 2, be slow to speak. My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen and slow to speak. Slow to speak means literally be late. Be late with your words. Be late. Listen first, listen first, listen first. Muzzle your mouth and then talk. Who here hasn't spoken too soon and regretted it? Especially when you're a little angry. Have words ever slipped out and you go, oops? Right? We all have. I see your smiles. You know, and if we would have just waited, you know, it's kind of like the email you shouldn't have sent when you're mad. And then, I know I shouldn't send this, send. Oh, I shouldn't have sent this. Why did I do that? You know, once words get out, it's hard or impossible to erase them. How many of you have been scarred by words that were spoken many, many decades ago? Right? And has there been anyone you've scarred with a word? Now, there is forgiveness, there is reconciliation, that's a whole other thing. But my whole point is that words are powerful. The author of Proverbs says that the tongue has the power of life and death. Our words are powerful. God created the earth with words. Words are powerful. Your words are powerful. Slow to speak. You know, why did I lie? Why did I gossip? Why did I slander? Why did I say such harsh things? If I only would have been slow to speak. What James is saying here is allow God to manage your mouth. Maybe our prayer in the morning ought to be, Lord, help me this day to be quick to listen and slow to speak. Lord, manage my mouth. Or as the psalmist says in Psalm 19, I love this prayer. Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be pleasing in your sight. Right? You listening? I mean, this isn't new, right? But don't we need reminding of this? One of the reasons I love teaching is it teaches me. One of the reasons I love preaching is that it preaches to me. My prayer before a sermon is, Lord, speak to me before you speak, and then speak through me. May the words of my mouth and the meditation of my heart be pleasing in your sight. You know, just quickly, I think of the power of words. I think of when Jesus was being baptized. Remember the voice from heaven, God's words. This is my Son, whom I love. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him. What a blessing. See the power of words? This is my son. This is my daughter, whom I love, whom I cherish. With him I'm well pleased. Listen to him. Listen, listen, listen. So, here are a couple things to ask. When you're in a conversation, am I talking too much? Am I talking too much? When you're in the midst of a conversation, am I talking too much? And if the answer comes back, oops, maybe, then maybe just stop talking. Am I listening too little? Am I listening too little? Is this convicting for anybody right now? Am I talking too much? Am I talking too much? Am I listening too little? And it's usually the people that talk the most don't know aware that they talk so much. Right? A talker talks. And here's something else. When we're listening, don't just be listening for the breath so you can jump in with your comment. I'm guilty of this all the time. You know, I'm listening. And as soon as they go, I go, yeah. Right? So don't interrupt, Jamie. Don't interrupt with your thought. And I have to write stuff down because I forget. That's my rationalization for interrupting. Or not interrupting. I wait till Steve stops for a breath and then I go, right? So maybe write stuff down. What are you doing right now? Well, I'm writing down what I want to say I'll forget. Would you rather me interrupt you? No. Okay, let me write this down. Okay. Slow to speak. Quick to listen, slow to speak. And command number 3, if you do that, everyone needs to be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. I think what James is saying is this, is that becoming angry is both the result and a decision. It's a result. You become less angry if you're quick to listen and slow to speak. It helps you because in listening you understand the person's perspective better and you don't interrupt. Does it work? I thought I'd try it out. I thought I'd try it out with my brother. I thought I'd try it out with my brother talking about politics. And he lives in a part of the country that's a different color than the state in which I live. So I thought, okay, I'm going to call my brother. I've never talked to him about politics. We've kidded about it, both been passive-aggressive about it, but we've never really talked about it. So I think, okay, I'm going to call him up. I'm going to test this out, and I'm just going to ask questions. Just going to ask questions. Dave, can you help me understand da-da-da? And can you help me understand da-da-da? And what about da-da-da? And why do you believe your candidate? Just asking questions. And so I asked, and he shared. I asked, and he shared. I asked, and he shared. Well, how'd it go? Well, it went a lot better had I had an agenda. Did I get mad? Oh, yes. But a lot slower. And I didn't say anything, even though I thought I'd be right. But the relationship is okay. James said, be slow to anger. Slow to anger. And how do you get there, James? He'd say, be quick to listen and slow to speak, and that will help you be slower to anger. Well, what's wrong with anger? It's good to get angry. We need to get angry. There are things in life we need to get angry about. But Paul writes in Ephesians, in your anger, don't sin. Jesus got angry, right? Anger is a Christian virtue, but it needs to stay within its stalls. In your anger, don't sin. James would say everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry. Why? Because here's the reason. Our anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. The righteousness that God desires. What's the righteousness that God desires? Kind of a biblical religious word. The righteousness that God desires is a right relationship. A right relationship with God and a right relationship with one another. And he says that anger that goes outside the stalls, that goes outside the barriers, that's sin, it ruins, corrodes your relationship with God and with your relationship with one another. You know this, right? Right? We've all gotten angry and gotten outside the boundaries and said stuff, done stuff that we go, oh gosh, I wish I could take that back. But we can't. Quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. See, when you try to be right and convince the other person you're right, in a sense, that's your righteousness. I am right. I am right, and I am going to win this argument. But when you win the argument, do you really win in the relationship? Sometimes, but most of the times, you win the argument with your kid or your spouse or a coworker or a friend, and you look at them, where are they? Well, I won, I was right. But we can write them right out the door. We can write a spouse, we can write a non-believer by being right. The Bible says we are right. Well, they're gone. Because we righted them right out the door. It's the wrong right. It's the wrong right. Yes, we're right, but the right God desires more than us being right is a right relationship. Jesus didn't come to make people right or to be right. He came to make people right. There's a difference. Ponder that. I have a neighbor who accused me of stealing her water. I thought she was kidding at first. So I went to talk to her. She wasn't kidding. She thought I was stealing her water. She showed me the hose for which I stole her water. It wasn't my hose. She said, of course you're going to say that. Well, she was serious. About a week or so later, I heard from some neighbors that she told them that I was stealing her water. Okay, I'm starting to get angry. Well, Paulina went over and talked with our neighbor, and because she doesn't want to talk to me anymore. Seems like things were smoothed over a bit, and then a little bit later, I'm watering the front of my yard with my water, and I see one of her gardeners on my land, my property, my bushes, cutting my bushes out. I said, what are you doing? I said, stop. Why are you cutting my bushes? He didn't really give me a good answer. So I said, stop, and he stopped, and I came out a little bit later, and the gardener had cut, well, there's the bush that he cut out. I came out a little bit later, next picture, and he had cut out 3 feet of my hedge on my property that I'd been planting and growing for 5 years. Slow to anger. So when I was driving back, Paulina was in the car with me, and my neighbor, who accused me of stealing her water and then took out half my property, exaggeration, felt that way. I said, I need to talk to her. Paulina said, I'll come with you. And in my mind, I should have asked it this way: can you help me understand why your gardener just cut off 3 feet of my hedge? I should have asked it that. Can you help me understand why 3 feet and a shrub is gone on my property? How I said it was intensely, not yelling. Don't ask Paulina, she's here today. She might give you a different version. Intensely, I asked it this way: can you tell me why you have the right to come on my property and cut my hedges? I was right. You can tell I'm right, right? I'm right. But what James would tell me, Jamie, it's not the right. Yes, you're right, but you righted her right out of any kind of neighborly relationship, even though you're right. Got it? So I was right, but I righted her right out of being a neighbor. Was I right? Am I making this point? I'm so right. Pictures, evidence, videotape. I am so right, but my approach was so wrong, and it's not the right. You know what it's like. You win the argument. You're so right. But the righteousness that God desires is not necessarily you being right, but you being right with the person even when they wronged you. Well, how do you get there? How do you get there? How do you get there? You know how to get there. Be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to become angry. Really easy stuff to remember, really hard to do. 3 questions I'd like you to talk about amongst yourself. Number 1, it's in your program. Who is a constant talker in your life and not a good listener? How is this person's relationships? Would any name you? Who is a great listener? What do you think makes them a good listener? Would anyone name you? Number 3, what can you or will you do differently this week to become quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry?